Hi, my name's Cara Lisette and I'm a mental health nurse and a mental health blogger from Hampshire. I've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and anorexia, the latter of which I am currently in treatment for. And today I want to talk to you about the government's plans to introduce calorie labelling in restaurants and what impact this is likely to have on people with eating disorders. The news is pretty inescapable these days, and it's likely you will by now be aware of the government's plans to add calories to labels in the war against obesity. Perhaps as an anorexia sufferer still in treatment, I am hyper aware of these kind of stories, but I'm not sure that that's the case. The war against obesity and fighting the fat have been hot topics for many years now, and the battleground language we use implies that people's bodies are to be fought against and conquered, only winning the war when they become thin, no longer a burden on the NHS and its already pressured resources. But what impact is this policy change going to have on the issue at hand? Evidence suggests almost none whatsoever. Nutritional information has been on food packaging for over a decade, yet obesity rates continue to rise. It's almost as if it's a more complex issue than calories in versus calories out. Obesity is inextricably linked to poverty, stress, and mental and chronic illness, among other things. The argument that a lettuce is cheaper than a pizza is nonsense because you can't feed a family on a lettuce. However, try telling that to my anorexic brain last year. Try telling me in the peak of my relapse that I needed more to sustain me than that, because I wouldn't have listened. I didn't listen when I was too ill to work, or when I was in a hospital bed on a drip, or when I was so physically and mentally compromised that I had to join a day patient programme because outpatient wasn't enough for me anymore. The idea that adding calories to menus is going to help people manage their weight when none of the other issues that lead to obesity are being addressed is nonsense. But it's not only useless, it's actively harmful to people with eating disorders, yet the government have completely ignored calls to consult with eating disorder charities and researchers and those with lived experience when devising this ill-thought-out plan. The cost of eating disorders is thought to be over £15 million per year for the NHS. Yes, being overweight has links to increased chances of diabetes and heart disease, for example, but anorexia is not without risk. 1 in 5 people with anorexia will die from it, a number far exceeding that of those who are obese. And a BMI chart was never meant to measure an individual's health in the first place. Anorexia causes organ failure and electrolyte imbalances, and even those starting recovery can experience refeeding syndrome, which can be deadly. So why implement something that's useless for the group of people you're trying to target, but actively harmful for another? It's just more evidence that the government doesn't care about mental health, and that the empty words spouted every mental health awareness day are nothing more than performative. Calorie counting can be completely debilitating. I have never, in the years since nutritional information was introduced, been able to turn off the calculator in my brain. No matter how far I've got into recovery, I still spend my days mindlessly adding and subtracting in the back of my mind, always working out what equation I need to do that day in order to avoid my biggest fear, weight gain. Yes, the quantity I allow myself is higher now that I'm in recovery, and the amount I try to purge from my body by any means necessary is less. But that doesn't mean I can switch off the running commentary of numbers that plagues me every minute that I'm awake. And how, as sufferers and survivors, can we overcome that fear of weight gain when we're bombarded with messages that gaining weight is morally wrong, shameful and burdensome? How can I stop seeing calories as evil when they're demonised everywhere I turn? Our bodies need calories. A calorie is a unit of energy, not an enemy. We literally need them to survive. Our bodies are burning calories all the time. It's how we digest food and pump our blood and breathe and do all the other amazing things that it does while we're just going about our lives. We even burn calories when we sleep. When people are malnourished, their bodies gradually start to shut down, and yes, it is absolutely possible to be malnourished in a bigger body. This is why people with anorexia die. Eventually our organs can't take it anymore. Not enough calories doesn't always equal weight loss, but it can equal death. We shouldn't be living our lives in a calorie deficit, because that means living a life of fatigue, hunger and low mood, all things caused by starvation. The amount of energy each individual needs to maintain homeostasis is completely variable person to person. We all have our own set points. There's also mounting evidence that diets don't work and can actually lead to weight gain over time. Diets don't work, but chances of developing an eating disorder as a result of dieting are high, and that's not just anorexia. Periods of restriction are the biggest contributor to binge eating, which gets people stuck in weight loss, weight gain cycles for most of their lives. Evidence shows that doing this can be worse for your health than being statically overweight. Someone with a BMI of 27, considered overweight, statistically has better health outcomes than someone with a BMI of 19. We need to review cause versus correlation when discussing weight and poor health. These new measures could be an absolute disaster for people suffering with an eating disorder or attempting to recover. I've been a healthy weight now for 2 months, but I do not consider myself to be anywhere near full recovery. Every time I think I've moved a bit further along and made a little more progress, the world seems to throw something at me that makes it just that little bit harder. I'm genuinely questioning right now whether I'll ever be able to eat out again if I can't avoid calorie counts. The thoughts of having a menu in front of me with those figures dictating my choices brings me out in a cold sweat. My life is already ruled by numbers, calories, weight, steps. This is just one more area in which I can't hide from anorexia, can't blink at myself, and can't pretend for even 1 minute that my existence isn't completely dictated by the calculations that go on in my head every minute of every day. This campaign and the reporting of it has the power to destabilise even the most recovered person who has an eating disorder in their history, however dormant it may be laying. So my message to everybody struggling with these messages is that no matter what size body you live in, you deserve food. You need food. Your existence gives you the right to eat. You don't have to spend your life making choices based on what you feel you're allowed to eat instead of what you want to eat. You don't have to feel guilty about picking up a chocolate bar or naughty for eating biscuits. You shouldn't feel bad for having a slice of birthday cake somebody brought into the office. Not one single part of who you are or your worth as a human is attached to the food you put in your mouth, and the government shouldn't make you feel like your existence is a burden. It is true that more people in the UK are obese than underweight right now, but the cases of eating disorders are rising astronomically, far greater than the rate of obesity. Additionally, anorexia isn't the only eating disorder, and people with bulimia and binge eating disorder often live in larger bodies. Eating disorder services, however, are so underfunded that often the only very sickest can get treatment, only those who are physically compromised, underweight and anorexic. Perhaps if the government invested more into mental health services rather than doomed campaigns, they might actually see some of the results that they're looking for. Anorexia has the highest mortality rate of all mental illness as a result of not only the physical complications, but the risk of suicide. I wouldn't wish an eating disorder on my worst enemy, but everywhere we turn we're suffocated by the idea that we don't deserve to eat, that our worth is dependent on our weight, and that somehow not fitting into the exact ideal that's expected from society means that somehow we're less moral, less pure, and less good. There is no simple answer to solving the problem with obesity or the problem with eating disorders, which so very often overlap. What I think I can say categorically is that this campaign is not the answer. If you've been affected by any of the issues that I've discussed today, I would recommend visiting the BEAT website. They are the UK's leading eating disorder charity and have already made statements about how they feel about this campaign. If you want to hear more from me about topics such as this and my recovery journey, you can find me on social media at Cara Lisette on Twitter and Instagram. And if you Google Cara's Corner, you will find my blog where I talk all about my experiences with my mental health and my recovery journey. Thank you for listening.